Hello FlossTube. I can never remember which FlossTube number this is, but you'll have seen it on the title. And today is, I believe it's the last day of March 2022. So I thought I would do my WhipGo update and also my plans for April. I have taken some notes, so if you see me looking off camera for a while, that's why. But I wanted to start out with, I actually got 2 finishes last month, and that was because the 2 projects that happened to be called were relatively close to completion. And then because I finished them, I was able to work some extra on another project. So the first one I want to show you, which kind of, well, I'm always excited about a finish, right? Sneak peek. I finished, I'm really sorry if you can hear that. Someone just drove by. I finished Autumn All Around by Glendon Place. And here it is. I really love what those colors do when you step back and take a look at it. And I also love what it looks like up close, so I'll show that to you too. Essentially, it's a repeat. 4 quarters make the round. Not essentially, I mean, it just plain old is a repeat. And it was fun to stitch. There was enough variation to keep it interesting. I'll come in closer now so you can see. I don't know if I can hold it up. If only there were something like clips to keep things in place. All right, so I used the called for DMC, and then you can see the Algerian eyelets are stitched in the called for Krennic. There's also Krennic in the teardrop shaped motif around the orange leaf. Teardrop shapes, I should say. I made a few changes. First of all, I tried to use a DMC variegated for these Algerian eyelets, and I thought it would look really neat, and it looked really neat in my head, but then it didn't quite do what I wanted it to do in real life. So I took them out. Now this is quite a loose weave linen. And so when I took it out, the fabric had been quite stretched. So I tried to kind of unstretch it back into place. You can still tell that center red eyelet, that one was probably the worst. I'm hoping that once it's stretched out for framing, that will sort of work itself out. So that was an attempt to change the pattern. One change that I did make and held on to was that I moved this acorn and then this leaf, and how these 2 were positioned. I moved them over by 1 thread. This is stitched over 2. Moving it over by 1 thread meant that everything would be centered. I think that's the one I moved. Either that or from the purple oak leaves up, this sort of section here, to make it be centered on, well, on the center. It was a little tricky. I had to kind of keep track of where I was and make sure that I didn't mess up, I guess. And then this chart also calls for Mill Hill beads. You can see them, for example, there and there and there. It was really important to keep this chart oriented correctly because even though it is 4 repeating quarters, the one difference is that, actually these are the sides. I should have this way around. Top and bottom have this motif here, and then the sides have this smaller motif. Once I got to the beading, it was just full steam ahead. So there she is, Autumn All Around by Glendon Place. And that was one of my WhipGo goals, and I didn't need to stitch my full 10 days. My goal is always to work on them for 10 days each. How much I work per day is just dependent on the day. But that left me some extra time to work on another project, which was kind of fun. So that's Autumn All Around. The next one I want to show you is substantially smaller. Years ago, I bought a bunch of Mill Hill kits, and I've been working on them off and on ever since. And one of the ones I purchased was, or three of the ones I purchased were the Celtic Santas. This is the Wales Santa, and I'm telling you, it's not the Welsh Santa. I kept wanting to call it that. It's the Wales Santa. I'll give you a close-up of him in a second. Use the corner of this foam core here to get a better view. I just used all the called for supplies. I don't know, there's not much to say except that these are a ton of fun to stitch and they work up fairly quickly. So again, I didn't have a ton to do on this guy. No, 1 minute, that's not true. I did have a ton. I did the whole thing. This was my new start. March had my March Whip Go board. One of the numbers called was a new start, and this is the one I did. It was a lot of fun. And there's these fun long stitches on his leggings, and then these stitches to make his beard and a little bow for his mustache, which was a lot of fun. And he did not take the full 10 days to stitch either. Now, on my Whip Go board, I've got the Long Dog Samplers Pandemic, which was a free chart a while back. I don't know that it's still free. It might be, might cost money now. But Long Dog put this one out, and I remember thinking, it's free. All I have to really do is buy fabric and floss, and I want something good to come out of this, you know, productive to come out of this pandemic. So at first I had thought, oh, wouldn't it be fun if I finished it before the pandemic was over? My opinion has now changed. I would like the pandemic to be long gone and done before this is done. But I have made it across the top, and that was because of the extra days from left over from finishing Autumn All Around and the Mill Hill kit early. I do have a little bit to do here before I completely finish this last page, which is a partial page. But here we go. So for a closer view, I don't think I've ever done something this large, and it's so much fun. You just don't see all the little motifs, like this guy, for example, when you look at the chart, or at least I don't. But as you stitch, you start seeing these things. And I decided, at first I was leaving all the back stitch till the end. And then I thought, oh my goodness, when I finish, I'm not gonna want to go back and do all the back stitch. So I started doing it over here and some into the previous page too. So I did that. There's the bird holding onto a bit of a twig, some tiny little bees or flies, some stems, those kinds of things. There's a spider. He's gonna have some spider friends as well once I do some more. Some added detail in these butterflies. I once heard someone say that if you're gonna do a monocolor project, make sure you pick fabric and floss that you really love. So I mulled over it for a while, and I do really like the gray and blue combination. I mean, there's my clothing. Almost all of it is in that color scheme. So I went with a DMC. Now I'm not going to be able to remember. I'll see if I can find it, and then I'll just post it on the screen. But it's all DMC. I just bulk ordered from the States, I think. Got a big old bag of them. And then this fabric, I'm not sure what it is, but it is a one-sided fabric. So this side is a light mottled gray. I didn't want it to be too crazy because I didn't want it to distract from, but I did want it a little more interesting than just one color. So you can see the back isn't mottled at all. So it's, the modeling is just printed on the front. I'm stitching 2 over 2, which is why it's big. And I have, you can see I've gridded. Once I've done stitching completely, including the back stitching all the way across the top here, I will take out the horizontal gridding lines so that I can get the effect, the full effect. I grid with sulky sliver thread. It's a bit of a pain, but it's less of a pain than having to constantly frog things because I miscounted. When she's done, I'm not done all the horizontal, I'm not done all the horizontal gridding, as you can see, but the bottom of the vertical lines is where the chart ends. So, not a small chart. Takes a bit of wrangling when I'm working on her to keep the extra fabric out of the way, but I'm still enjoying it a lot. And for this one, I did buy the PDF. I don't have the PDF reader that people use, but I just downloaded it into GoodNotes and I mark as I go as if it were a paper copy. Those were my March projects, and when the April numbers were called, the first one I started working on was Dinah's Garden. There's, I think, 3 of them in this set. I have blueberry. Now, there is the fabric. It is a Belfast linen 32 count in summer khaki, and I bought it from Acorns and Threads. So I had been on, this is a few years back now, I went to visit a friend out in Oregon, and just for kind of an extended weekend type thing, and we went blueberry picking one day, and I had not known that blueberries could grow on bushes / trees. That was news to me. Blueberries around here are tiny, incredibly flavorful, and they grow on the ground. But this is a different type of beast, I guess. And so I bought this chart from Acorns and Threads, which is a cross-stitch supply store out there. I didn't actually go to the store, so I ordered online when I got back. I also decided, in my infinite wisdom, that I really wanted to make this into a small pillow, sort of as a commemorative thing. Up here it says it will say blueberry, and I'm probably gonna change that to say something like Oregon, and then the date. I think it was 2016 when I went. Because it's 1/1, I stalled. But if you've been watching my floss tubes, you'll know that recently I worked on Alpine Garden that has some 1/1 section. So I feel a bit more confident with that now. There you go, up close. All these are gonna become blueberries around the bush. And there she is in her blueberry picking outfit. There's a bit of a border that works its way around here. If you do the whole thing, you can connect it by the border. But I'm just doing this one. By whole thing, I mean the whole series, sorry. But I'm just doing that one. So I'm gonna have a good chunk of fabric left over when this is done. And I'm thinking I might actually be able to finish this within the 10 days allotted. I think I worked on her one or 2 days so far. Now I know this is an April one, and April has not technically started as of filming, but once my 10 days are done, I give myself freedom to do whatever. And I did, the days that I worked on my long dog sampler, my pandemic, I checked those off sort of proactively. Now this is stitched with Classic Colorworks threads. And I'm not going to show them all to you because many people are familiar with them. But I will say they've got some, I'll show you the light blue maybe. They've got some light variegation to them. And since I'm stitching 1/1, it shows up really nicely. You can see there's a bit of a lighter section there and some darker sections. So I'm really enjoying that. All right. Now, the other call for April is R is for Reindeer. And it comes out of this, I don't know, can I call it retro or vintage yet? Leisure Arts book. Let me check when it was printed. Copyright 1993. I was in high school. Is that vintage? Retro? So what they do is they give you a chart for Santa and the Sleigh, and then 4 reindeer, 2 reindeer bodies, and then 2 heads that fit one body and 2 heads that fit another body. And what I did was I bought a piece of fabric that will, hopefully, fit the entire crew. And I'll change one of the noses to red so that it looks like Santa and the reindeer. In the picture, they've attached little bells to the green sections of the reins. I hope that's what it's called, the tack. And they've got kind of a gold cord attaching them all, and they give some brief instructions on how to make them stand-ups. I don't think that will be an issue, but stitching them all takes some time. So I had struggled a bit originally. I wanted to make the yellow part of the reins sort of a more golden color, and I had tried using acrylic blending filament, and I thought it didn't look sparkly enough. So I switched over to a petite treasure braid. So the first thing I did when I picked this up is I finished picking out the old yellow, and then I added some petite treasure braid. Hopefully you can see the sparkle. All that yellow trim on the green, that's all petite treasure braid. These have some neat shading. I really like the effect that you get. Sort of vintage illustration, if you will, type style. So what I did was I took some sulky silver and I made a fairly small, I didn't leave huge margins. And the reason is I'm only going to leave, I don't know, ½ an inch or so around the whole thing when I cut it out. Well, when I cut it out, maybe a bit more, but now this was a very narrow piece of fabric and it's also quite long. And when I divided it up, the size of the divisions differs depending on what's going to be sewn in that division. So I made some notes for myself, and I keep it on a sticky in the book so that I can tell exactly what goes where. So when I was working on the deer, I decided I also wanted to work on Santa's sleigh. I think initially I told myself that I would save that as like a reward for the last, but I changed my mind. So once I had done the deer, I started working on the sleigh, but the gold and green of the sleigh was already completed with just a few stitches in here. I just have, I think, just this kind of empty line here to fill in, and then all the sleigh itself will be done. These empty spots here, it's going to say Claus and Co., I think, in gold. And I like to leave the metallics for the end. So after I'd done those extra stitches there, I decided I would stitch the gloved hand. And I did. I stitched the whole gloved hand. And then I realized right at the end that it was 1 stitch off. So I took it all out and I was like, okay, I'm gonna do it again. And then I thought, oh, I don't want to tackle it right away. You can see here there's a missing stitch. And it was because of that missing stitch that I miscalculated the whole thing. Still have to put it in, but this time it's right. So this time I thought instead of counting off, I'll make sure to start on something that is right next to already stitched. So I did his cuff here. And then I filled in this red of the suit. And I just have 5 stitches to go and his hand will be done. This is one of those things that I love the look of it before backstitch, but once you add the backstitch, it really pops. So I'm looking forward to that as well. And now I'm kind of debating with myself. I think I'm gonna do, there's a tiny bit for his belt here. And then there's his beard and head about here. I think that'll be fun to tackle. So that's what I've been working on March and now beginning in April. So hopefully in a month's time, I'll come to you with substantially more on this and maybe a finish for blueberries. I hope. All right, thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Please feel free to leave me any comments, or if you're stitching on anything similar or maybe even the same projects, I'd love to know about it. And I'll talk to you next time.